Let's talk about some really simple mods for the beginner for the Toyota Tacoma. You know, maybe something if you're just trying to get your feet wet a little bit, you want to do some things to your truck, but maybe you haven't done anything before, so you're a little bit leery. I've got really 5 that are pretty darn simple to do under the hood of the Tacoma. The last 2 maybe a little bit more difficult, a little bit more intermediate, I guess. But let me tell you, the first 2, probably 3, are really pretty simple. So let's pop the hood, take a look. And the good thing about starting under the hood is if you screw anything up, none of this is mechanical or anything. So if you screw anything up, you can always go back to what it was before, or you're not going to really see it anyway. So let's start with the simplest. That is the battery tie down. This little bracket right across the top. By the way, there will be links down below if you guys want to check this stuff out further. But all this entails is taking the old one off, a couple of bolts, I think there's actually only one, and then putting the new one on. It's very simple to do, something just to add a little bit of bling underneath the hood and something a little bit more substantial. This is obviously a little bit more beefy than what the OEM version is. And it looks good under here too. Something simple to start with just to get your feet wet a little bit. The second one is even easier than the first one, and that is the TRD oil cap. This is very simple. Obviously, you just unscrew the OEM version and put on the aftermarket. Doesn't have to be TRD. There are other kinds, other flavors out there that you can get. One thing I'll caution you on, if you decide to do this, typically when you get one of these aftermarket caps, at least the TRD version, the insert here, the TRD part, it is like a metal kind of or a metallic sticker, and it comes unattached, loose in the package, and there's a reason for that. Obviously, when you screw this on, it's going to turn a different way, and if you stick this sticker on before you put the cap on, the TRD might be facing that way, might be facing this way, who knows? It won't be straight. So do yourself a favor, go ahead and put the new cap on, and then affix this interior decal to the cap. You'll thank me, believe me. You notice mine is a little bit off, it kind of points this way. I got lucky. That's because this was actually on a Toyota Tundra I had. It was set up perfectly in that truck, but the threading is a little bit different in the Tacoma, so it kind of kicked it a little bit this way, but luckily for me it's not far off and I can live with the way that it is right there. The next one, and this one steps up just a little bit, is an intake. Doesn't have to be this particular one. Mine, as I've mentioned in other videos, is modded slightly. I painted the tubing itself. This was, I believe, black, might have been silver, I don't know. I roughed it up. There is a video out there on the channel if you want to see how I did that, as well as little install videos for all of these things. But I roughed it up with a little bit of 3M Scotch-Brite, and then I primered it, I painted it, and then I clear coated it, and you can see it came out really, really nicely, and it's held up well. One of the big concerns I had heard from some people when I had done this is that the heat from the engine would somehow make the paint either come off or chip or crack or whatever, and you can see by looking at the intake itself, didn't have any problems, or I should say the tubing. No problems with that whatsoever. It still looks brand new, and I'm sure it's dirty. If I was run my finger across it, I'm sure, well, there you go. I'd get some dirt off of it, but you really can't see. As far as the intake itself, it's a bolt-on application. You utilize the bolts, some of them that were already down in the truck, and then you just put the tubing together, kind of like a little bit of a model or an erector set, if you will. Plug in the 2 connections. There's a MAF sensor here. That, make sure you're careful with that. You put it in the right way if you're going to do this with any intake. I don't know that you can screw it up. Typically they're designed so that they only go in one way, but you want to make sure it's the right way and handle it with care. Over here we have a vacuum tube. It's just held on with a squeeze clamp, and that's it. There's really nothing else to this. Very simple mod to do. couple of clamps to put on, and you're golden. And look at what you get when you're done. I mean, just adds a little bit of bling under here, regardless of what kind of intake you go with. If you go with a closed air intake, you'll probably have a nice plexiglass window to see that beefier filter down there. Just something simple you can do that really is pretty difficult to screw up. Lastly, and this is probably the most difficult one, or actually this is second to last, and that is the Auxbeam switch. This is just wired into your battery right here. Very simple. The red cable plugs in here, and then the ground, I believe I grounded it right over here. Yeah, right down there. That's it. That activates the switch. Then any electrical accessories that you might have, and on my truck I've got the lights in the front, an LED light bar in the bumper, and of course up top I've got some pod lights there. You just run the wiring into the box itself, and this ties things up so neatly you can't even see where the wiring goes in, right? It all comes in right down here onto the side, plugs into a couple spots. You run one more wire into the cab, very simple, and then go ahead and put your switch in like I have. There are various ways to mount this switch. I chose to get this little bezel here. You can get that from, I forget what company, but nonetheless, it's out there in the install video. And then it looks like a finished OEM product, right? Now, we're staying under the hood, so that's the only part that actually leaves the hood. Lastly, and this is probably the most difficult, only because of fear. And the fear is that you might drill through your hood. Of course, I'm talking about the Redline tuning hood struts, and I do recommend these in particular. I've had different companies, or hood struts from different companies. I've had some that actually are no drill, that bolt into the little bracket holding the hood on. I do not recommend those. It just seems to put too much stress on this bracket. This is the way to go. They're the most secure, they're the strongest, but as I mentioned, the fear factor is the kicker in this one. You do have to drill holes up through this bottom part of the hood. The problem is if you go too far, obviously you'd be through the top of the hood. So be patient. I would tackle this one after you do other things so that you get a little bit of confidence if you're new to modding. It does require a couple of holes drilled right down here for these brackets behind this cover. You're not going to drill through anything if you do those, so there's not a big fear of that for doing those hood struts. Anyway, those are just 5 pretty simple, I'd say beginner or starter mods for the Toyota Tacoma if you want to get your feet wet a little bit. Maybe you've never modded anything before. It's a good way to get started and kind of get the hang of how things work. Leave a comment. Let me know. Done any of these things, or are you maybe holding off because you're a little concerned that you might screw something up? I'd be curious to know. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there. Bye.